the beginning, Vivian and Mike's marriage. Vivian was a woman unlike any other. She wasn't just a loving wife and a devoted mother. She was a brilliant businesswoman. From the very beginning of her career, Vivian had built a successful jewelry empire. Her brand was synonymous with innovation, creativity, and beauty. Her company grew from a small boutique to a globally recognized name, with designs that captivated not only the local market but also international clients. Vivian was an epitome of success, a woman who could balance family, work, and personal ambitions. Mike, Vivian's husband, was the perfect picture of a successful man. He was a charming, handsome, and caring partner, and everyone admired their relationship. They had been married for 12 years, and their life seemed like a perfect fairy tale, with 2 beautiful children, a stunning home, and all the luxuries they could ever dream of. But as time passed, the cracks in their relationship started to appear. Vivian's company, which was thriving, required more and more of her attention. She was increasingly busy, leaving Mike with more time on his own. While she worked tirelessly to grow the business, Mike's presence at home became increasingly scarce. Mike worked for an investment firm, and though he wasn't as occupied as Vivian, his frequent late nights and trips became more common. At first, Vivian didn't think much of it. She understood the demands of his job. But as months passed, she noticed a distance growing between them. Their once spontaneous conversations, late-night talks, and shared laughs were slowly replaced with awkward silences and forced exchanges. Vivian tried to fill the gap with family vacations and dinner dates, but Mike always had a reason to decline. Work was his excuse, and at first Vivian bought into it. But deep down, she began to feel the emptiness of being in a marriage where the emotional connection had started to fade. One evening, after a particularly successful business event, Vivian returned home to find Mike sitting in the living room, alone, staring at his phone. He hadn't asked about her event or how it had gone. His eyes, usually warm and filled with affection, were now distant. Vivian felt an unease settle in her chest, a feeling she couldn't ignore. She had worked so hard for her company, but in doing so, she realized she had neglected the one thing she thought would always stay the same: her marriage. As time went on, Vivian's suspicions grew, and the distance between them only seemed to widen. One evening, after returning from another exhausting business trip, Vivian stood at the door of their bedroom, watching Mike silently scroll through his phone. She had been gone for a week, yet he barely acknowledged her presence. She couldn't help but wonder. What had changed? It was then that Bella entered the picture. The third party, Bella's arrival. Bella was a woman who could turn heads in any room. Tall, strikingly beautiful, with a smile that could melt anyone's heart, she possessed a magnetic charm that few could resist. She was also the new head of marketing for a rival jewelry company, a position that naturally led her into the same industry events that Vivian attended. The first time they met, Bella seemed like just another charming businesswoman, polite and friendly. Vivian, always eager to network and learn from others in the industry, welcomed the opportunity to connect with her. But Bella had a different agenda. She wasn't just interested in networking with Vivian, she was there to steal more than just business secrets. Beneath her polished exterior, Bella was a woman driven by ambition, and she quickly identified Mike as a perfect ally in her schemes. Bella knew what she was doing. Her captivating charm was not just a tool for business success, it was her weapon. She saw in Mike someone who could help her take what she wanted, and she wasted no time in using her allure to draw him in. At first, Mike was hesitant. He loved Vivian, or at least he thought he did. But the distance that had grown between him and his wife left him vulnerable, and Bella was quick to exploit that weakness. It started with casual conversations, seemingly innocent exchanges at industry events. Bella would sit next to him during breaks, making him feel heard, appreciated. Soon, she began to invite him out for drinks, offering to help with his work projects. Mike, unsure of where things were heading, found himself accepting. It was harmless, at least that's what he told himself. As the weeks went by, Bella's influence over Mike deepened. She didn't just offer him attention, she made him feel alive again. Something he hadn't felt in his marriage for a long time. He began to confide in her, talking about the issues at home, about his frustrations with Vivian's constant focus on her business. Bella listened, offering sympathy, and at times, a little too much understanding. Mike's resolve began to weaken, and he found himself looking forward to the time he spent with Bella. She was a breath of fresh air. Someone who saw him not as a husband or a father, but as a man who needed validation. Slowly, Bella made her way into his heart, and from there, into his mind. He had become addicted to the attention she gave him, something Vivian had no time for anymore. Soon, their professional relationship turned personal. What started as casual meetings became secretive, private rendezvous. Bella wasn't just after Mike's attention, she wanted more. She had been eyeing Vivian's company for a long time, and now that she had Mike on her side, she had the perfect plan to take it from her. Bella knew that with Mike's help, she could dismantle everything Vivian had worked for. She wasn't just a woman scorned, looking to steal a man. She was a woman with a clear goal, to destroy Vivian and claim everything she had built. Bella was no stranger to the ruthless world of business, and she knew how to use her charm to get what she wanted. Mike, though still conflicted, began to fall deeper into Bella's world. He was torn between his loyalty to his wife and the intoxicating power he felt with Bella. She promised him a future where he would no longer be in the shadow of Vivian's success. He could have it all: power, control, and, most importantly, a life without the emotional weight of his marriage. The plan they devised was simple but deadly. They would begin by sowing discord in the company, undermining Vivian's position without her realizing it. They would exploit her absence, her focus on her business, to their advantage. Each move would be calculated to make Vivian doubt herself, to make her lose the trust of her employees and clients. Slowly but surely, they would break her down, until she had nothing left to fight back with. But what neither Mike nor Bella expected was Vivian's strength. They didn't know that beneath her polished, elegant exterior, Vivian was a woman who had fought tooth and nail for every inch of success she had. They underestimated her resilience, her intelligence, and soon, the very plan they thought was foolproof would turn against them. As Mike and Bella set their plan into motion, Vivian remained oblivious. But beneath the surface, things were beginning to shift. Vivian wasn't just going to be the victim of this betrayal. She was going to fight back. The game had begun, and now it was a matter of who would come out on top: Vivian, the woman who built it all, or the two who thought they could destroy her. Mike and Bella, a dangerous alliance. As the weeks wore on, Mike's life began to shift in subtle yet irreversible ways. What started as a brief moment of indulgence, a few drinks with a colleague turned confidant, had grown into something more dangerous, a full-blown affair, one that seemed to offer him everything Vivian no longer could. Each time he met with Bella, he felt a rush, a validation of the man he had started to forget. Bella had become his escape, a secret world where he was the center of attention, the one with power, the one who mattered. Mike's connection with Bella began to develop into something more insidious. Their meetings became less about business and more about emotion. Bella made him feel seen, heard, understood, in a way Vivian hadn't for months. She saw the cracks in their marriage before Mike even recognized them, and she exploited them with grace. She told him exactly what he wanted to hear, reinforced his fears and doubts about his marriage to Vivian, and provided comfort in ways that felt entirely new. Mike would return home from their meetings, and the weight of his double life would press heavily on him. He would try to put on his mask of normalcy, but it was becoming harder and harder to ignore the guilt gnawing at him. He knew he was betraying Vivian, but he couldn't bring himself to stop. Bella had become a siren, calling to him with promises of something more, something he couldn't get from his wife anymore. Each time they saw each other, Bella's influence over him grew stronger. Their conversations, once professional, now carried an electric charge. Bella would ask him personal questions, digging into his insecurities, making him question his role in Vivian's world. She knew just the right things to say, just the right gestures to make him feel important. The flirtation started off innocent, but soon became overt. Touching his arm when laughing, brushing against him, in ways that lingered just a moment too long, and those piercing looks that seemed to strip him of his defenses. One night, after a particularly exhausting week, Bella invited Mike over to her apartment. under the guise of discussing some new marketing strategies. What should have been a business meeting turned into something far more intense. As soon as Mike walked into the apartment, the lights were dimmed, the scent of candles and expensive perfume filled the air, and the tone of the evening was set. This was no longer business. They talked, but their words were almost lost in the magnetic pull between them. Bella didn't just speak to him, she captivated him with every movement, every look. The conversation shifted, growing more intimate as Bella leaned in closer. She touched his hand, trailing her fingers across his skin like a whisper. The tension between them was palpable, and soon the line between right and wrong, between commitment and betrayal, blurred completely. Mike tried to resist at first, but Bella's touch was like fire. He couldn't pull away. She made him feel something he hadn't in years, something raw and unguarded. The moment she kissed him, all his reservations, all his guilt, evaporated. It wasn't love, it wasn't passion. It was an escape, a chance to feel alive again. That kiss, slow, deliberate, was the moment that sealed his fate. From there on, Mike was no longer a man torn between two lives. He was a man fully immersed in a lie. But what Mike didn't realize was how deeply Bella was playing the game. She wasn't just in this for the thrill of the affair. She had ambitions, and Mike was nothing more than a pawn in her larger scheme. Bella had long harbored ambitions to control Vivian's company, and she saw in Mike a key to unlock the doors she needed to break open. If she could manipulate him, if she could plant the seeds of doubt in his mind about his marriage, then she could use him to destroy Vivian's empire and seize it for herself. The more Mike became involved with Bella, the more he started to believe the lies she was feeding him. He became disillusioned with Vivian's success, resentful of the time she spent building her empire at the expense of their marriage. He had spent years supporting her, but where had it gotten him? He was just the supportive husband, standing in the background while Vivian took all the glory. Bella, on the other hand, made him feel like he mattered. She showed him how powerful he could be if he was free from Vivian's shadow. Together, Mike and Bella hatched a plan to take down Vivian's company. It was a slow process, one that would take time and careful manipulation, but they both knew they had to be patient. First, they would plant seeds of doubt, undermine Vivian's leadership, and weaken her position with key stakeholders in the company. Bella knew exactly what to target: Vivian's overdependence on her instincts, her lack of attention to the financial side of things, and the way she always trusted her intuition over logic. They would play on those weaknesses, slowly shifting Vivian's decisions until her empire began to crumble. Bella started by introducing small changes in the way the company was run. She suggested new marketing strategies that seemed harmless on the surface, but slowly led the company into risky ventures. Mike, too, began to question Vivian's decisions more openly. He would subtly suggest alternatives during business meetings, undermining her without anyone noticing. At first, Vivian didn't think much of it. She was busy expanding the business, traveling, meeting with clients, and dealing with her increasing responsibilities. But as the months passed, Vivian began to feel something was off. The company's direction felt uncertain, and there were whispers of dissent among her employees. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was a growing tension in the air. Little did Vivian know, her husband and Bella were systematically destroying the foundation she had spent years building. The trust she had placed in both of them was being used against her, and they were moving swiftly to ensure her downfall. Vivian realizes the change. Vivian was no fool. Though she had been distracted with expanding her company, she wasn't blind to the changes happening in her life. There were small things at first, subtle shifts in Mike's behavior that made her question his commitment. She noticed the long hours he spent on his phone, the nights he came home later and later. And then there were the excuses, the constant business trips, the late-night meetings, the odd hours he kept. For someone who had once been her closest confidant, her best friend, this new version of Mike was a stranger. Vivian tried to ignore it at first. She was busy. She had a company to run, a legacy to build. She convinced herself that Mike was simply distracted by his own work and that their relationship would bounce back once things settled down. But when she started noticing that he was becoming increasingly distant, and when his attention seemed to wander during their brief interactions, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her gut any longer. One evening, as Vivian sat in her office going over the company's quarterly reports, she decided to confront Mike. She had to know if her suspicions were justified. She couldn't allow herself to be in denial any longer. "Mike," she called softly as he entered the living room that evening. He didn't respond immediately. He was distracted, his face buried in his phone. "Mike," she said again, her voice more insistent this time. He looked up, startled. "What's up?" Vivian hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "We need to talk." Mike's eyes flickered with something that Vivian couldn't quite identify. Nervousness? Guilt? Whatever it was, it only deepened her suspicion. "I don't think we've really talked in a while," she continued, her voice tinged with concern. "I'm starting to feel like there's a distance between us that I don't understand. You've been different lately, Mike, and I need to know why." Mike shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the door. He wanted to avoid this conversation, to push it aside, but he couldn't. Not anymore. The weight of his secret was becoming unbearable, but still, he couldn't bring himself to admit the truth. "I've just been busy, Viv," Mike said, his voice sounding hollow even to him. "You know how it is." Vivian's heart sank, but she pressed on. "Is there something you're not telling me? Have I done something wrong?" Mike opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, he stood there frozen, as if caught between the truth and the lie he had been telling himself for so long. Vivian's instincts screamed at her. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. And just like that, the pieces began to fall into place. The late nights, the sudden aloofness, the coldness in his touch. It wasn't just work, it was something else. Something worse. It wasn't long before Vivian discovered the truth. The affair, the betrayal, and the plan to take everything she had built. It was a slow unraveling of her life, a descent into a nightmare she had never imagined. But she wasn't going to let it end like this. She wouldn't allow Mike and Bella to destroy her legacy. Vivian wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a woman who had built something from the ground up, and she would stop at nothing to protect it. The battle was about to begin, and this time she was in control. The conspiracy revealed. Vivian was not a woman to be easily defeated. Though she had noticed the subtle changes in Mike's behavior and the increasing distance between them, she still wanted to believe that everything could be salvaged. She convinced herself that their relationship could be restored if only they could reconnect. But one day, all of Vivian's suspicions were cruelly confirmed. Vivian started to observe Mike more closely. She noticed the late-night phone calls, the hidden text messages, and his long hours locked away in his office, away from her sight. At first, she tried to dismiss it, but then one day, she accidentally overheard a conversation between Mike and Bella. Though she couldn't catch every word, the tone of the conversation was unmistakable. Mike's voice was warmer, more intimate than it had ever been with her. He was laughing in a way she hadn't heard in years, and Bella was feeding him compliments with a sense of familiarity that sent chills down Vivian's spine. It wasn't just a business relationship. There was something much darker lurking beneath the surface. Vivian started to piece together the fragments, the late nights, the strange absences, the secretive behavior. It was all part of a larger scheme. As Vivian continued to dig deeper, she uncovered files Mike had carelessly left on his desk. Among them was a detailed business plan, one that she recognized immediately, a plan for a major investment project. But this wasn't a normal expansion. There were financial dealings with companies she had never heard of, and in the fine print there it was, Bella's name. Bella was more than just a business rival. She was part of a plot to strip Vivian of everything she had built. The documents revealed the full extent of the betrayal. Mike and Bella weren't just having an affair. They were conspiring to take over Vivian's jewelry company, to dismantle the empire she had spent years building. And the most painful part was that Mike, her husband, the man she trusted above all, was at the heart of this plot. Vivian was shattered. Her mind raced as she tried to process the enormity of the betrayal. But as the full scope of Mike and Bella's conspiracy became clear, something inside Vivian clicked. She wasn't just going to let them destroy everything she had worked so hard for. She was going to fight back, and she was going to do it with everything she had. The counterattack. Vivian uses her intelligence. Vivian's initial shock soon gave way to a cold, calculated resolve. She knew that confronting Mike and Bella directly would be dangerous. They had the upper hand, they had been plotting this for months, and Vivian was the last person they expected to fight back. But Vivian wasn't going to let her empire crumble without a fight. She wasn't just going to be the victim in this story. The first step was to gather information. Vivian didn't confront Mike immediately. Instead, she began to meticulously track every move, every conversation, every subtle hint of what had been happening behind her back. She started by examining the financial records more closely, looking for any discrepancies or signs that Mike and Bella had manipulated funds or made secret deals. It didn't take long for her to discover the first cracks: small changes in contracts, shady financial agreements, and, most importantly, Mike's growing influence over the company's board members. Vivian knew that if she wanted to take back control, she had to act carefully. She couldn't let Mike or Bella see that she knew what they were up to. So she began her counterattack in silence. She reached out to key allies in the company, trusted employees who had been with her from the beginning. She spoke with her closest confidants and began to lay the groundwork for her comeback. At the same time, Vivian carefully monitored Mike's actions. She was astute, and she knew how to read people. She saw the cracks in his behavior, the guilt in his eyes when they spoke, the defensiveness when she asked about his late nights. But what Vivian understood better than anyone was that she couldn't just focus on Mike. She had to deal with Bella as well. Bella, who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating Mike's weaknesses to get what she wanted. Vivian's strategy was simple, but effective. She needed to reclaim her position in the company and isolate Mike and Bella from any support they had. She began reaching out to the company's investors, those who were still loyal to her vision. One by one, she started to rebuild relationships with the people who had helped her build the business. She met with them personally, showing them her commitment to the company's growth and presenting a new vision for the future, one that didn't include Mike or Bella. Meanwhile, Vivian took careful steps to undermine the subtle changes that had been made in the company's structure. She started by addressing the marketing strategies that Bella had put in place. Vivian didn't just change the marketing direction. She used her deep understanding of the industry to create a new, more compelling brand identity for her company, one that would appeal to both existing clients and new investors. As she reasserted her dominance in the market, the cracks in Bella and Mike's plan began to show. But Vivian didn't stop there. She knew that the battle wasn't just about regaining control of her company. It was about taking back the respect and authority that Mike and Bella had undermined. So she began to strategically make moves in the background, carefully influencing key decisions without letting anyone know what she was up to. She would influence the decisions of suppliers, start covert negotiations with new partners, and quietly shift the company's direction in ways that Mike and Bella couldn't predict. Vivian's plan began to unfold with precision. The more she worked behind the scenes, the more the tides began to turn. Mike, oblivious to his wife's growing influence, continued to push forward with his plans, believing that Vivian was too distracted to fight back. He didn't realize that Vivian had been silently organizing her defense, preparing to strike when the time was right. One day, Vivian gathered her closest allies in the company for a private meeting. She didn't reveal everything, but she showed them enough. She laid out a plan that would ultimately expose Mike and Bella's treachery while securing her control over the company. She was ready to turn the tables, and this time, she would be the one in control. The plan was meticulous. Vivian knew exactly where to target. She started by securing the loyalty of key employees who were still loyal to her vision. She made sure that they understood what was at stake and how important it was to remain united. She worked on gaining the trust of investors who had been swayed by Mike and Bella, showing them that the company's success was tied to her leadership, not Mike's or Bella's empty promises. Vivian wasn't just fighting to reclaim her company. She was fighting for her own dignity, for her own place in the world. And as her plan began to take shape, She could feel the power shifting back into her hands. Mike and Bella had underestimated her. They had thought she was just a woman, weak, vulnerable, and distracted. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated her intelligence and her ability to fight back. The game was no longer in their favor. Vivian had turned the tables, and now it was time for her to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The battle was about to get even more intense, but Vivian was ready. She had always known that the key to success wasn't just hard work. It was the ability to adapt, to fight back, and to take control when everything seemed lost. And now, she was prepared to do whatever it took to ensure that her empire remained in her hands. Confrontation and the power struggle. Vivian had spent weeks carefully plotting her return, the threads of her plan weaving themselves together with an almost terrifying precision. But now, the time had come to confront the two people who had so callously betrayed her trust. Mike and Bella. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that it was the only way to regain control of her company and her life. No longer was she going to be the woman standing in the background, hoping things would fix themselves. Vivian had learned the hard way that hope was not a strategy. It was time to act. Her first move was to confront Mike. He had been increasingly distant, his eyes shifting whenever she asked about his late nights or secretive meetings. Vivian had always trusted him, but now she couldn't deny the growing sense of betrayal that festered in her heart. She knew it was time to end the facade and face the truth, no matter how painful it was. One evening, when Mike returned home after another long day, Vivian stood waiting for him in the living room. The soft hum of the city outside filled the silence, but inside, the tension was palpable. She had prepared for this moment, steeling herself for the storm that was about to come. Mike entered the room, his usual casual smile fading when he saw the expression on her face. "Vivian?" he started, his voice uncertain. "What's wrong?" Vivian looked him in the eye, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "Don't pretend, Mike. We need to talk. I know everything." Mike's face paled, his body stiffening. He immediately started to protest, but Vivian cut him off. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know about you and Bella. I know about the plan to take over my company. How long did you think you could keep this a secret?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of anger and hurt, but it was also laced with the confidence she had reclaimed in herself. Mike stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to find the words. He had been caught, but the guilt on his face wasn't enough to make him admit to anything. Vivian's heart broke as she realized that, at that moment, Mike was still trying to protect Bella. His loyalty to her was greater than his loyalty to their marriage, to their life together. "Vivian," he finally spoke, his voice low and defensive. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Bella, she made me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. I was just lost." Vivian felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she stood tall. "Lost?" she echoed. "Mike, I've been with you through everything. I've sacrificed so much for this family, for this company, and this is how you repay me." She stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. "You've betrayed me, and you've betrayed everything we've built. For what?" "Huh?" Mike lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. He knew he had failed her, and no words could undo the damage he had done. Vivian could see it in his face, the guilt, the regret, and beneath it all, the stubbornness that kept him from fully admitting his role in the betrayal. "You've crossed a line, Mike," Vivian said coldly, "and now it's time for you to face the consequences. You don't get to destroy my life and my business and just walk away." She turned away, signaling the end of their conversation. The silence between them stretched, filled with the weight of unspoken truths. Mike remained standing, unsure of what to say, but Vivian had no intention of waiting for him to make amends. Her heart had hardened. There was no room left for reconciliation. Mike had made his choice, and now Vivian would make hers. As she left the room, she could feel her determination growing. This wasn't just about saving her marriage. It was about reclaiming the power she had lost. She was going to fight for her company, her legacy, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. The next step in her plan was to deal with Bella, the ultimate counterattack. Bella had always been a master of manipulation, but Vivian was no novice. She had spent years in the business world, navigating its complexities and learning how to outsmart her competition. Bella might have had charm, but Vivian had something even more powerful: intelligence and an unwavering will to succeed. And now, it was time to turn the tables on her. Vivian knew that confronting Bella would be different from confronting Mike. Bella was calculating, ruthless, and more than willing to do whatever it took to achieve her goals. She had already proven her ability to manipulate Mike, but Vivian would not fall victim to the same tactics. She began by gathering information, poring over every detail of Bella's activities in the company. Vivian reached out to her most trusted employees, those who had not been swayed by Bella's charms, and asked them for help. Slowly but surely, she started to uncover the full extent of Bella's involvement in the conspiracy. It wasn't just about taking control of Vivian's company. Bella had been manipulating the entire corporate structure, positioning herself in key roles and sowing seeds of doubt among the board members and investors. Vivian also knew that Bella had been working behind her back for months, gaining influence through underhanded tactics. She had managed to convince several influential investors that Vivian's leadership was flawed, that she was too distracted to manage the company properly. Bella's lies were insidious, and they had begun to take root in the minds of people Vivian had trusted. But Vivian had a plan to expose Bella's deception, and she would not let her get away with it. The first step was to expose Bella's true intentions. Vivian arranged a private meeting with the board of directors, carefully laying out the evidence she had gathered over the past few weeks. She revealed how Bella had manipulated financial decisions, how she had undermined Vivian's leadership, and how she had been working in tandem with Mike to take over the company. The board members, once divided in their support for Vivian, were now left in shock. The truth was out, and there was no denying the extent of Bella's betrayal. But Vivian didn't stop there. She knew that Bella wouldn't go down without a fight, so she began to play the game on her terms. She started to subtly shift the company's direction, reasserting her authority in ways that would undermine Bella's influence. Vivian reached out to the investors Bella had swayed, reminding them of her track record, her vision for the future, and the undeniable success she had built. She also began to court new investors, those who had been hesitant to support her before, but who now saw the opportunity to back a leader who had proven her strength and resilience. With every step she took, Vivian gained ground. She knew that Bella was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike, but Vivian was one step ahead. She had made her moves so carefully that by the time Bella tried to rally support, it was already too late. Vivian had gained the upper hand. In a final confrontation, Vivian invited Bella to her office. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment when everything would come to a head. Bella entered the room, her face as confident as ever, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes when she saw Vivian standing tall, looking every bit the leader she had always been. "You thought you could take everything from me," Vivian said, her voice calm but firm. "You thought you could steal my company, my legacy, and destroy everything I've worked for. But you were wrong." Bella opened her mouth to protest, but Vivian didn't let her speak. "I know everything, Bella, and I've already made sure that you will never have a place in this company again. Your lies, your manipulation, it's all over." Bella's face twisted with anger, but Vivian didn't flinch. She had taken back control. She had outsmarted Bella at her own game. The next few days were a whirlwind. Vivian moved swiftly, securing her position at the helm of the company. She exposed Bella's schemes to the public, ensuring that no one would ever trust her again. Investors pulled their support from Bella's side, and the board members who had once doubted Vivian quickly realized that she was the true leader of the company. As for Mike, Vivian gave him one last chance to redeem himself. But he refused, choosing to stand by Bella instead of his family. Vivian knew that she had lost him, but she also knew that she was better off without him. The betrayal had been painful, but it had only made her stronger. In the end, Vivian emerged victorious. She had reclaimed her company, exposed the treachery of those who had tried to destroy her, and proved to everyone, including herself, that she was unstoppable. The battle had been hard fought, but the victory was sweet. Vivian had triumphed, and now nothing could stand in her way. Her empire was safe, and she was ready to rebuild it, stronger than ever. She had learned the hardest lessons of her life, and now nothing would ever threaten her again. The final showdown, Vivian's triumph. Vivian stood tall in her office, staring out over the city skyline. The lights twinkled below her like a sea of stars, reflecting her own resilience and strength. The battle was far from over, but she had reclaimed her place. Her empire, once on the verge of crumbling, was beginning to rise from the ashes of betrayal. The strategy she had set in motion was working, but she knew the final confrontation with Mike and Bella would come soon. And when it did, there would be no turning back. Bella, sensing the tide was turning, began to make bolder moves. She tried to rally the remaining loyalists within the company, whispering promises of power and control. But Vivian wasn't blind to the danger. She knew that the only way to end this once and for all was to strip Bella every ounce of influence she had left. It would be a fight to the finish, but Vivian was determined. She had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. The next step was setting up a final meeting with the remaining board members. These were the people who had been swayed by Bella's charm, who had once doubted Vivian's leadership. Now, they were the key to her victory. Vivian called them to a private gathering, carefully selecting the timing to ensure that every move she made would hit Bella like a ton of bricks. The night before the meeting, Vivian went over her speech one last time. She had gathered every shred of evidence, every whisper of doubt, every whisper of betrayal, and she would lay it all bare. This wasn't just about saving her company. It was about showing everyone, Mike, Bella, and herself, that she was more than capable of standing alone. The day of the meeting arrived, and Vivian felt a surge of calm wash over her. She entered the conference room with confidence, her back straight, her gaze steady. Mike was already there, looking uncomfortable in his suit, shifting in his seat as if the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders. Bella, ever the calculating one, sat beside him, her eyes sharp as a knife, but there was a nervousness behind her composed facade. Vivian stood at the head of the table and, without saying a word, began to present the evidence. Every financial discrepancy, every forged document, every illegal transaction. She showed the board the truth that they had been too blinded to see, and one by one, the room went silent. Bella tried to interrupt, to spin the story in her favor, but Vivian cut her off each time with precision and authority. She didn't just present the facts, she made them undeniable. It wasn't long before the board members began to murmur among themselves, shifting uneasily in their seats. Vivian could feel the power shift in the room. She had won. The company was hers again. Mike, Vivian spoke softly, but her words were sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Mike, who had been sitting in stunned silence, looked up at Vivian. His face was pale, his lips trembling. Vivian, I never meant for it to go this far, he stammered, his voice weak. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought Bella and I were just... I didn't. You didn't think, Vivian interrupted coldly, and now you will live with the consequences of your actions. The betrayal was still fresh, still painful, but Vivian had no time for mercy. Mike had chosen his path, and now he would pay the price for his greed and cowardice. As he squirmed in his seat, Bella's mask finally slipped. Her facade of confidence cracked, revealing the raw desperation beneath. She lunged across the table, but the board members quickly intervened, restraining her before she could cause more chaos. Take her away, Vivian said, her voice unwavering. She's not welcome here anymore. With the company now firmly back in her hands, Vivian turned to face the future. She had reclaimed her legacy, but she knew that this battle had cost her dearly. The pain of betrayal would never fully go away, but she had emerged stronger, more resolute than ever before. The next few months were a whirlwind. Vivian moved swiftly to secure her position, reasserting her authority within the company. She implemented new policies, streamlined operations, and reached out to loyal partners who had stayed by her side through it all. Slowly, her empire began to thrive once again. The board members who had once doubted her now fully supported her vision, and investors were eager to come back, seeing the strength in her leadership. Mike, meanwhile, was left with nothing. His connection to Bella had cost him everything: his career, his reputation, his family. Vivian ensured that he was banned from the company, and any attempt he made to salvage his image fell flat. No one wanted to be associated with a man who had betrayed his wife and his business partner. His fall from grace was swift, and he disappeared from the public eye, his name tarnished forever. Bella, however, faced a much harsher fate. Vivian made sure she paid for her crimes, exposing her illegal dealings to the authorities. Bella was arrested, her empire of lies crumbling around her. No longer was she the charming, manipulative woman who had once fooled everyone. Now she was just another criminal, facing the consequences of her greed and deceit. The final victory, a future reclaimed. Months passed, and Vivian found herself standing at the head of her company once more, stronger and more determined than ever. The betrayal had hurt her in ways she could never fully explain, but it had also forged her into someone new. She was no longer just a woman who had built a business. She was a leader, a survivor, and an inspiration to those who had witnessed her rise from the ashes. Her company was thriving again, her reputation restored. Vivian's vision for the future was clearer than ever, and the weight of the past no longer burdened her. She had rebuilt everything, not just for herself, but for her children and for the legacy she would leave behind. One evening, as Vivian stood in her office overlooking the city, she thought back to everything she had been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the battles, and as she gazed out at the city lights, she knew that she had truly won. She had come back from the brink of destruction and had emerged victorious. And as for Mike and Bella, their fates had been sealed. The world they had tried to tear down had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever. Vivian knew that they would never truly understand the strength it took to get there. After all, they had tried to take everything from her. But in the end, it was she who had taken back control. Vivian had reclaimed her life, her company, and her future. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and come out on top. And now, nothing and no one could ever threaten her again. She had won, and this time it was for good.